Let's talk about Map of the Soul 7, shall we? I originally did somewhat of a review for Map of the Soul 7 the day it came out, and I also did an unboxing of the album at the same time. However, as you can probably guess, I never uploaded it, just because I wasn't happy with the recording at all and I never wrote anything down, so my thoughts were all over the place. Also, I just sounded so sad and tired and didn't want people to think I was disappointed or annoyed with the album. It just wasn't something I wanted to put out as it didn't represent me or my content at all. But here we are now, almost a year and over a half later since Map of the Soul 7 came out, and it's probably really weird to see a review or analysis of some sort for this album when all the promotions and era for it ended ages ago. And I agree. But since it came out, I've had a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time, for my thoughts to marinate about how I would approach the album in this video. It wasn't until recently, and by the way, when I mean recently, I mean I wrote this exact sentence a year ago when I originally wrote this, because this video has been in the mind works for probably a year. I had this idea for a video for like a year and a half ago, but I started writing it a year ago. So a lot of things have changed. This was originally meant to be 2 videos where I do a review of the album and then the second what if scenario for the second video. So yeah, it wasn't until recently, and I say that in quote marks right now, until I managed to figure out and rank the songs from the album. And I think I have enough thoughts on this album to finally talk about it. This video has been circulating in my mind for a year and a half, and that's not an exaggeration. It's been a long work in progress, and I'm so happy that we're finally here. So in this video, I just want to talk about Map of the Soul 7. Take this as a love letter to this album. I want to go through the run-up to the album, but the main part of this video is the alternate routes this album could have gone, and the hypothetical situation of there being 2 singular albums of the Shadow and Ego side. It's all just for fun at the end of the day. I'm going to split this video into different parts so it's a bit more structured. Time codes are in the description if I remember. Choose the content at your own will, it's your choice to see and hear what you want. BTS hadn't had an official comeback since Map of the Soul Persona in April 2019. I mean, you could count BTS World soundtrack, but we're just sticking with official comebacks here, meaning we had to wait 10 months until the next comeback. However, a few days into the new year of 2020, it was announced that BTS would be coming back with a full album on February 21st, 2020, called Map of the Soul 7. With that, we got something that Big Hit had never done before. A schedule, showing the dates of when things would drop. This included a pre-release single in January, dates for concept photos, the track list, music video dates, as well as dates for interlude Shadow and outro Ego. There was also Connect BTS, which was a very significant event during this period as it highlighted many artists from around the world and their work. It was such a beautiful part of the comeback. I originally was going to go to the London one in March, but you can probably guess why I didn't do that in the end. And we'll get to those reasons later. This kind of part in particular is like one of the reasons why Map of the Soul 7 is the celebration and best showing of BTS's art and creativity so far, for me anyways. Being able to showcase so many talented artists around the world with your influence and would also link to the themes in your album is spectacular. There was a lot of content to take in, but it really did put the comeback period on full volume, which led to such a positive atmosphere for this comeback. This promotion was like none other, and I think Big Hit, now rebranded to Big Hit Music, now under Hype, and BTS's teams did such a great job when it came to promotion this time. I think having a timetable of events before the album drop was such a good choice in my opinion. It also allowed people to be more prepared for the comeback and the various releases. The only thing I didn't understand was having 2 different music video releases and having the official version of the On music video released a week after the actual album came out and the song dropped. That didn't make sense to me, and it obviously kind of affected the streaming of both the music videos, but in the end it's nothing that dramatic. As a result of this though, every time I think of the music video of On, I only think of the Kinetic Manifesto performance video. Now the actual album. I'm just going to give a slight overview of my thoughts of the album. I don't know, we'll just go with it as we go along. Reacting to it for the first time, I definitely thought it was on par with Love Yourself Tear as their best album. I was so impressed and blown away with it, and with what BTS had produced and created with the tracks. And there were really no songs that let the album down at all or took away from it. I will be biased, obviously, when talking about the music, considering they are my favourite artists. I'm going to start with what I liked about the album, which is basically the majority of it. I would say like 95%. First of all, the cast of songs is full of variety with genres and sounds. It's a beautiful sonic journey you go on. You have Black Swan, which is a trap pop track with an orchestral version which shows how well mastered their songs are and how flexible they can be with mixing genres and styles. You have R&B with My Time, adult contemporary with Moon and Inner Child, hip hop and trap with and Respect, and emo rap with Shadow. The mix of genres such as EDM and pop in We Are Bulletproof the Eternal and R&B ballad pop in 0 O'Clock. There is so much to unpack when it comes to the musicality and diversity of Map of the Soul 7. It's undoubtedly one of its greatest strengths as well. And it's also because of that point that this album doesn't have any misses or letdowns for me. Every song has its purpose on the album and has a meaning that is important to the artists. Every song has a reason to be there, and this is why it is a strong body of work. This is just a brief review with some of my thoughts on the album. It really deserves its own video, and originally it was supposed to be a part 1 to this video, but then I think I decided I'd prefer to make a whole series on each of BTS's albums, so I'll just save that until then. But what got me thinking for a long time, not only before this album was released, but after as well, was the concept that the Map of the Soul series was inspired by. The Map of the Soul theory by Carl Jung, we all know by now, is what BTS's series was based on. In the theory, Jung proposes that there are 3 hidden or unconscious aspects of a person that link to how we think and behave. The 3 aspects are named the persona, the shadow, and the ego. As we know, Map of the Soul Persona was the first installment in the series, so it would be correct to think, as the fandom I think most people did, that this would be a trilogy, with the next installments being Map of the Soul Shadow and then Map of the Soul Ego, right? But then why did we get Map of the Soul 7 and then not the trilogy that we thought? To start this off, I think it was definitely planned in the first place that the Map of the Soul series would be a trilogy with Persona, Shadow and Ego as the different titles. Not only was it speculated, but I definitely think Namjoon mentioned something about it somewhere on a live show.
해볼게요. 맵 오브 더 소울 7, 맵 오브 더 소울 7. 네, 저희가 뭐 이미 앞서 사실 인터뷰에서 말씀드린 적은 있지만은 원래는 이제 섀도우랑 이고로 사실 따로 낼 계획이었고 근데 이제 저의 여러 가지 저의 이제 니즈와 뭐 그런 것들로 인해서 여러 가지 상황들로 인해서 작년에 이제 하반기 앨범이 나오지 못하게 되었습니다. 그래서 휴가를 떠나면서 이제 올해 어떻게 보면 앨범이 딜레이가 되는 만큼 또 연말도 껴있고 했으니까 그래서 섀도우랑 이거를 합치게 되었고 세븐이라는 타이틀을 어쨌든 처음에 그 제안을 받았을 때 굉장히 적절한 제목이겠다라고 생각을 했어요. 뭐 어쨌든 여러 가지를 같이 상징할 수 있는 의미라는 생각이 들었고 섀도우랑 이거를 사실 합쳐서 같이 낼까라고 했을 때 이 제목을 어떻게 정할지 감도 안 오더라고요. 네, 진짜 감이 안 오죠. 어떻게 해야 되나. 그래서 세븐이라는 게 딱 적절하게 7년차라는 그런 연도에 적절하게 이제 사용이 됐다라고 생각을 하고요.
Another thing is that before anyone says why aren't you mentioning the animus kind of section of it, as that is as important as the Persona, Shadow and Ego. When looking at Namjoon's live and him talking about the original plans, he never mentioned anything about an album inspired or based off the anima and animus part of it. He mentioned Shadow and Ego. Plus, obviously, in Map of the Soul 7 we could clearly see the cut and the difference between the Map of the Soul Shadow and Map of the Soul Ego side having also 2 different title tracks with Black Swan and On, and also having Interlude Shadow and Outro Ego but nothing to do with the animus or anima. That's why I'm not doing anything on it, and it's just more clear that it was supposed to be a trilogy on Persona, Shadow and Ego rather than a tetralogy with that in the end, just to make that clear as well. So the trilogy was definitely supposed to happen at one point. So the first thing I thought of is when they were most likely to come out, if they would have happened. Starting off with Shadow, I think it would have been an autumn release, obviously in autumn 2019, probably late September to October, as it would give enough time to prepare. Again, this is very speculative and based on what I thought at the time and also what other people in the fandom thought at the time after Persona came out, assuming Map of the Soul Shadow was next. With Ego, this is a little more unclear, with it supposedly being the last album in the trilogy, again, literally just speculation. It probably would have been released in 2020 as like a repackage or something. I mean, who knows, the day Map of the Soul 7 was released, the 21st of February, could have been the possible date for it, who knows. But again, this is just speculation, and just to give a rough idea of like how timing worked and then why it didn't work in the end. Now, we've got possible dates of when they could have been released. As Namjoon mentioned, however, there were many circumstances and situations that led them to release Map of the Soul 7 instead of the separate releases of Shadow and Ego. And I've come up and thought of some reasons why or circumstances causing this change in the next part of the section. Number 1. Having another trilogy might have been too similar to the Love Yourself trilogy. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm just remembering now, is that when I refer to the Love Yourself trilogy as a trilogy, I'm mainly referring to the 3 main bodies of music work, because obviously the actual Love Yourself trilogy as a whole is actually a tetralogy, with Wanda kind of being in the middle of her and Tear. But obviously that in itself never got a music release or album. But when I refer to Love Yourself trilogy, I'm just referring to Her, Tear and Answer. I understand that it's actually tetralogy and altogether not trilogy, but I'm just referring to the main music trilogy. Although we don't know the length or the content of Shadow and Ego and what they would have been, one thing this fandom speculated is that it would be similar to how the Love Yourself trilogy worked. For example, mini album, Persona, full album with Shadow and a repackage with Ego. However, you could argue that it sounds completely predictable, which is something that is definitely not on Bangtan's vocabulary. They change up every time their releases, make things unclear, which is why their new releases are always exciting. Going for another trilogy series would be obvious, and some may argue it's because of the success of the Love Yourself trilogy, and they would be rehashing it if they did another trilogy. I mean, I guess you could argue Shadow and Ego could have been mini albums, but that didn't seem to be the case. BTS don't do the same trick twice. They're experimental and they love thinking outside the box, and that's what makes them incredible. They're experimental, so I wouldn't push it past them if they wanted to switch up things again and to not go with what everyone was expecting, which was the trilogy. Number 2. 2019 was a wild year. I don't think BTS anticipated how much they had blown up. Not just in 2017, not just in 2018, not even before that in 2015, 2016, their trajectory up to now. But it's just everything in 2019 just bolstered their presence even more into the global music industry. Basically what I'm saying is that they were booked and busy, deservedly so. Being there, like for the whole 2019, they were extremely busy. Like every day there'd be like a new bit of content. And it wasn't until like their break in August, for only a month by the way, only a month, then they went back to like touring again. You know, their time to like prepare and produce an album and have a comeback was pretty skint. With Boy With Love and the release of Persona, it had shooted them into a brand new stardom, with brand new shows and performances promoting it. It was also the year with the launch of BTS World, with a whole soundtrack which sounded way better than a phone game soundtrack should be. Since the start of the year as well, they were also on the road touring everywhere, finishing the Love Yourself tour in early 19 that started back in 2018, and then starting their first stadium tour, Speak Yourself, in the US, then going to Brazil, then Europe, and places in Asia such as Saudi Arabia, not to mention their various award shows, plus their 5th fan meeting, Magic Shop, in both South Korea and Japan. BTS were performing or doing something practically every day, so their schedule was constantly busy, probably making it hard for them to plan and prepare a comeback. This heavy schedule with new things coming in every day, and the end of year performance taking up a lot, plus them announcing a break in the middle of August and the filming of Bon Voyage 4, there would be no room for a comeback, and I guess it got pushed. Plus Chicken Noodle Soup happened, which was a massive thing for Hobie, so he was probably working on that. All of them were working on their like own music as well. Like I said, who knows what could have happened, but if this could be a plausible reason of why they decided not to release anything else in 2019. Number 3. TXT's comeback. See, this one I literally remembered out of nowhere, and I thought this could be interesting, but I don't know if you remember, but TXT's first comeback after their debut with the Dream Chapter Magic was originally supposed to be released in September, not in October like it was. To cite Wikipedia about this, it explains that on August 8, 2019, it was announced by Big Hit Entertainment that they had originally planned to release the new album in August, but due to members being diagnosed with an infection and one of them being infected by back pains, It was then postponed to September. On August 20th, Big Hit revealed that some of the members had also been diagnosed by the same infection. Therefore, a reschedule of the album was, quote, had become unavoidable, citing the change in release date from September to October, meaning they had to push the comeback back so the members would be healthy and in good shape for the comeback. This pushback probably created scheduling conflicts in the company and might have been the nail in the coffin for scrapping the presumed Shadow comeback in the autumn, and therefore any sort of comeback in the rest of the year. And before anyone says anything, this is not me blaming TXT or anything for this outcome. If anything, I'm glad that the company made the right decision to let the boys rest and recover and push the comeback back at the time where they would be able to perform at their best. Also, we got Runaway. I definitely think by September 2019, the decision for Shadow and Ego to be in one album instead of two separate releases was probably already made by then, and this was just something that basically confirmed the change. Those are the main reasons I could think of that may have affected the circumstances of the change in the Map of the Soul series, but again, this is just speculation and I'm probably, most likely, completely wrong. But again, this is all for fun at the end of the day. But now, as we've discussed reasons why the Shadow and Ego albums were changed into one, we can now speculate what they could have been. We're going to start off with Shadow first. As I've mentioned throughout the video, I think it would be the second release in the Map of the Soul series, and I think a lot of people speculated that as well. What I'm going to do first is talk about if Shadow was an album, with Ego being the repackage. Then I'll talk about the possibility of them being both mini albums having the same length as Persona. Looking at the Map of the Soul 7 concept photos, Version 1 and Version 2 seem to be the best fit for Shadow in my opinion. Both of them being polar opposites of each other with a clear influence from Black Swan single, it would obviously go well with the Shadow as well. Especially Version 2, I feel, with the obviously it is very dark, not just in the theme of it, but just obviously in the lighting and the colour scheme as well. The use of the leather outfits, more kind of like villainous tone, obviously sets it for being more kind of dark and sinister as well. Now, for the part of the video I am most excited about, the track list. For the Shadow album, I am going to do 11 tracks overall, like there was for Tear, and for the mini album, it will be 7, just like Persona was. I chose 11 tracks because overall I think that's like a usual amount for a normal album. Obviously, one song right away we can definitely say was for Shadow is, well, Interlude Shadow, considering it is literally named after the album and the solo track that starts the album by Yoongi. It's obvious that it would have been on the Shadow album. It could be safe to assume that Shadow was one of the earliest songs made for Map of the Soul 7, so who knows how long this song has been around for. For the title track, I mean, Black Swan is the obvious choice, and I think it was mentioned somewhere that it was confirmed to be the title track, but I think most will agree that this is the obvious choice for the title track. From the theme and concept matching with the Shadow to the message of the song itself linking with the idea of the Shadow, it's clear Black Swan was made with the intention for it to tie with the Shadow side of the album and being the title track of Shadow. For the rest of the album, I chose these tracks. Louder Than Bombs. It felt right with the concept of Shadow, and it just fitted in well with the other songs with both the message and sound. Much more experimental, almost kind of like supernatural sound. It's nothing that we have heard BTS do before. It just does fit well with the theme personally, and I don't think I'm being far-fetched saying that. Ugh and 0 O'Clock. Their albums usually have a rap line and vocal line track, so it makes sense that they'd be on here. I mean, we could assume that Ugh was on Shadow and 0 O'Clock was on Ego, or vice versa, but I think it is safe to assume that, you know, having a vocal line and rap line track on a full album would be right. The next couple of ones, this is just much more guessing. Filter and My Time. I debated putting all the solos on here, but I think it would make more sense to spread them out across the series. Also, Filter and My Time again were on the Shadow side of Map of the Soul 7, whilst Inner Child and Moon fit more on the Ego side, and I think the fact that they were split up together kind of suggests that they would be on the same side. Again, we have no idea, but again, like I said, this is speculation and thinking, you know, just mainly looking at the track list and what falls in each side and kind of how they fit. Friends. Obviously, one of the subunit songs has to be on here, so I went with Friends. This was probably one of the hardest to decide because Friends and Respect, both of them feel like they fit on the Ego album more, but at the same time, because Jamais Vu was on Persona, it would make sense to have one with Shadow and one with Ego. I know these are really vague descriptions on why these would be on the Shadow album. Honestly, only Shadow and Black Swan for me are the obvious choices that could be explained easily, whilst the others could go either way. So that's already 8 tracks for our alternate Shadow album, but there's still more to add. So I've decided to add other BTS songs with styles, sounds and concepts that I think would bring the Shadow album together. I'm not saying these songs should be on the Shadow album, I just say maybe like the message, the lyrics, the sound, the style, the concepts of them would go with the Shadow album well. Spine Breaker. This is the kind of like fun upbeat song with a kind of deeper message that you'd guess on an album released by BTS. I chose Spine Breaker because the slower tempo of the song and the lower register used in their voices would fit well in the rest of the sound of Shadow. Plus, with a lot of the Map of the Soul 7 tracks taking inspiration from their older sound, Spine Breaker or a song similar to Spine Breaker would be a great addition. Paradise. Is this another way to remind BTS of the fact that they have never performed this masterpiece of a song from their Billboard #1 album Love Yourself Tier? Yes. But really, Paradise was another song that I felt could fit in well with the concept of Shadow. It is a nice linker and cohesive piece of music. With the sound and music, I think it can connect the different parts of Shadow whilst bringing the right message and vibe to the album. C. Finding the last track to complete the 11-song track list was the hardest to decide, as I wanted a hard hitter to close the Shadow album. An emotional song that would sum up the feeling of the Shadow album and leave the listener feeling impacted by the album by the end, making them think, making them feel, making them have a new outlook on life. So the two songs I thought would be the best candidates were Butterfly, the prologue version, and C. Both have a melancholy and deep emotional feeling in the melody and sound. The lyrics contain such a beautiful and bittersweet message. The sound and lyricism would be a satisfying way to end the album and to wrap up the Shadow section of the series. Also for me, just both of them just really do hit and you really get immersed in the song and immersed in what they are saying. However, choosing which song would be the best fit was the part that was the hardest. But in the end I chose C, as it just had a bit more of a stronger and dramatic ending that would work with the album. And also I was reminded of the orchestral version that I think was shown in Burn the Stage, the movie or something. And I don't know, it's just the connection of the orchestral artistry throughout the album. You have it with Black Swan as well, you know, the orchestral version, and having like a C orchestral version, it just brings it together to the kind of like the conceptual bit, the going to the mind, understanding how humans work, what Map of the Soul is based on, the Map of the Soul theory, going back to the Shadow aspect. And I think the message of C, talking about losing yourself in an ocean desert, fits completely with the message of Shadow. And I just think it works a bit more than the prologue remix, but only just by a bit. So, altogether, my fictional track list for a full-length Shadow album would be 1. Interlude Shadow, 2. Black Swan, 3. Filter, 4. My Time, 5. Louder Than Bombs, 6. Paradise, 7. Ugh, 8. 0 O'Clock, 9. Spine Breaker, 10. Friends, 11. C. Numbers 3 to 10, they could be in any order and it still work, but I just put it like that for now. I'm happy with that lineup, and I hope you're happy or somewhat content with it too. It does feel like a cohesive album that in some alternate timeline could be real. Again, this is not saying what we got wasn't good, it's just fun to speculate the alternate timeline when we would have got this album. Also, again, I'm probably completely wrong, and Namjoon, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. From what we just did, I guess Map of the Soul Ego in this scenario would be a repackaged album. Obviously, the other title track on and the actual title track on Map of the Soul 7 would be the title track for Map of the Soul Ego. Joining on would be the rest of the songs that we haven't mentioned yet. Respect, as I've mentioned, being the other unit song that hasn't been used yet. Moon. The more uplifting and bright message with Jin writing a song for armies using the moon as a metaphor, for me fits more with the theme of Ego than Shadow, and the sound as well. It's just such a beautiful song. It's a bit like a, ballad you're being serenaded by someone. Inner Child. It is kind of a similar case with Moon. It's a message of Taehyung looking back at his younger self, but with a more sentimental and loving theme. And the sound added to the emotional message conveyed in the song, and for me it just fits better with Ego than Shadow. We Are Bulletproof the Eternal. Being the emotional end of Map of the Soul 7, plus calling back to part 1 and part 2 of We Are Bulletproof, this would obviously be on the Ego album, and it being at the end would be a great closure as well. And the most obvious one, Outro Ego. Obviously, there is no debating it. Now, if we look at the other route, the one with a trilogy of mini albums, we just split the songs into 7 on each album, as Map of the Soul 7 included 14 new songs. It's the 7 again. For Shadow, Black Swan, Louder Than Bombs, Filter, My Time, Ugh, and Friends. For Ego, Ego, On, We're Bulletproof the Eternal, Moon, Inner Child, 0 O'Clock and Respects. I think I don't need to explain these choices. Most of them are already explained in the first scenario, but this time I added 0 O'Clock to Ego as I think that would fit more cohesively into the style and theme of Ego. But again, I would love to see what you think in the comments below. I do think you can make a case for either the songs going on to either album besides Shadow Ego and maybe the title tracks. But I think it just proves why Map of the Soul 7 works so incredibly well, as every song has a purpose to the lineup. But that's really it. Going through the hypothetical situations of the existence of the Shadow and Ego albums, I'm happy with the song choices and creative directions of both albums we decided. This is obviously not a definitive answer at all, or a list of correct songs, and who knows, I could be completely wrong with this. But isn't that the whole point? To have fun speculating at the end of the day about this alternate timeline where these albums happen, and just to talk about the album in general and how much we like it. Is there a massive conclusive point to the end of the video that is supposed to blow your mind? No. This video is just more of a what if kind of premise, and I've also realised that throughout making this video and writing the script. Really, there is not a massive point rather than how beautiful the Map of the Soul series and era was. Like I said at the start, this is more of a love letter to Map of the Soul 7, as I've always admired the album telling two intertwining stories of the Shadow and the Ego. Am I saying this is what should have happened instead of Map of the Soul 7? Absolutely not. No one knows BTS's creativity and ideas and artistry better than BTS themselves. That's why they went with the unexpected route with Map of the Soul 7 instead of the predicted Shadow and then Ego albums everyone thought they would. And that's why I love that they did Map of the Soul 7, because it was such a clever move. A massive album that would land on their 7th year as a group, where they could concentrate some of their best artistry over a month of songs, dances and art displays. Map of the Soul 7 is a celebration of BTS's creativity and how diverse their talent and discography is, and I always stand by that. We were so lucky to get so much. Also, I think over time I've fallen in love with this album even more. Not just by doing this video and writing the script, even though doing this has just made me love it even more. Not just for its musical content or concepts, but for what it represents now to me and what it means to me. I think I'll probably speak for a lot of people here by saying that the release of Map of Soul 7 was one of the last memories I had living in the normal world, when everything wasn't turned upside down due to the pandemic. You know, this literally came out just at the end of February, and you know, listening to this at the start of March, not knowing what's about to happen, it was one of the last things I can remember. It's special because it reminds me of some of my last times I saw my friends, going to school and work, which may sound weird, but you kind of miss those normalcies sometimes. Just having a normal life before the first lockdown. But not only that, it just really got me through the first couple of months of the lockdown, really the rest of the year in 2020. Watching the Black Swan and On music videos in the evenings, listening to calming tracks like Moon and 0 O'Clock and My Time when I was doing my schoolwork, or trying to figure out how online lessons work for the first time. I could go on about why this album has been so important to me. And I think listening to Map of the Soul 7 so many times just showed me how immensely clever and beautifully structured this piece of art is. And that's why I made this video. It is a love letter to one of the most important albums released in BTS's career and in 2020, because it deserves to have the love and time in the spotlight. Breaking down its story and structure and creativity the boys put everything into, God knows it deserves it, and how unlucky it was when it was released due to the circumstances. With the empty music shows, and now, unfortunately, the cancelled Map of the Soul tour, which is still heartbreaking. Map of the Soul was an album I want you to go listen to right away after you have finished this video. I want you to enjoy it again, like you are listening to it for the first time. And I hope BTS do know how much we love this album, despite not being able to see it live at all. I know they do. And I hope in the Permission to Dance concert in LA and any future tours, Map of the Soul will finally be done justice. Well, this was probably really long, I'm sorry, but I hope you enjoyed this. I want to do a video soon of me reacting to my Map of the Soul prediction video and just laughing at how wrong I was, because that would be fun. But see you very soon.